Yours?
Yes.
Wow. a lot of progression since I last saw you do these.
Oh yeah, you don't even know what I'm gonna do today.
What's your plan here as far as
I'm gonna do a warm-up set with my hands behind me, then transition during the warm-up set to hands in front of me.
progressive overload?
Progressive warm up.
See you, man.
Later, dude. And then I'll probably take a little bit longer rest on these, like 2 minutes compared to everything else. I just do like an I go, you go, which is a minute usually.
Okay.
Because I've been doing these with arms. I really wanted to have a 4-day training scheme. It just didn't work out.
I'm sorry, I fucked it up.
No, it had nothing to do with you. Just on paper, it was like every day is, roughly 20-ish sets. And then this day was like 40 sets. And it was like, it just ended up being such a fucking crazy session. I'm like, I might as well come in on Saturday and do the arm stuff.
So right now you're Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
That's where I've pretty much been like my whole training career.
Wednesday and Sunday are the
cardio days. I'm going hiking with Paul on Sunday.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I like that. Never heard that one before.
So I also think it's important this is like an important concept for people to understand as insofar as like what you were talking about with your hands, and just to kind of describe what Ethan was talking about with this is the closer that your center of mass and the weights that you're holding are to your hip. So like if Ethan's grabbing his ass right now, more of his arm weight is closer to being behind him. You can think about it that way. And then when the arms come in front of the body, they act essentially farther away from where the pivot point of the motion is. So in general, that's a concept that is, applies to every motion and every instance. I heard I forget who said this recently. I think it was someone outside of the fitness industry, physics industry. They said leverage is essentially what you get out of something for what you put in. I think that's a really good way to describe it, rather than discussing it in terms of like the mechanical properties of whatever. It's like that's helpful framework for me. Gonna go grab my heavier dumbbells over there.
I got my heavier dumbbells right here.
Thanks, man. I'm good. I'm good on that.
Ready, Ben? One dumbbell right here. One dumbbell right there.
Yo, lift that dumbbell.
Fair enough. Fair play.
All right.
This is a dumbbell here. Here.
I also think that this as a teaching tool to talk about anchors and restraints is probably the most helpful thing in terms of breaking this down when we're talking about like anchors and restraints and stuff. Because you can picture how ridiculous it would be if you just had this and you didn't have this thing. You can also picture that
what's that? But
if you didn't have this, you'd just be doing a fucking
face plant,
an RDL or a face plant. Yeah. So with this motion, I personally like to think a little bit more about smushing into pads rather than squeezing particular muscles, because you can just squeeze the shit out of your glutes or your hams, and that might end up working well, but a lot of the times it doesn't. Invariably, I find that like if you operate more on like a principle-based type thing of, keeping the thighs smushed and keeping the back of the tibias smushed into the pads, right? So, the quad area plus the bottom of the calf area. If you have those 2 points, reference points, then a lot of other things start to kind of fall into place insofar as the execution. What we don't want to see is a huge differentiation between hips and spine here.
I was just talking about it.
Okay, so that was a drop set that you just did.
Yeah.
I am not going to do a drop set.
I found out so today you report Mr. Apple and the quality of some of those. Yes, but you can see and tell you can go to people. Oh!
Is this your music, Nate?
Another important thing I think to keep in mind with these is a lot of these machines are set closer to being parallel to the floor, meaning that the angle of it is lower. The lower that you move the angle, the more it's going to be heavy at the top, just from a mechanical standpoint. And that also goes for where in the range specifically you're using, what range of motion you're using. So if you're just doing the bottom half of this range at this particular angle that we have set, generally speaking, it's going to be a lot of hamstring, because the more hip flexion you're in with a straighter knee, the more hamstrings are going to contribute. And the more that you get close to the top, the more that glutes are going to contribute, glute max specifically. So if you really want to just bias this toward either the hamstrings or the glutes, what you would do is you would just use either the bottom for the hamstrings or the glutes part of the range. And so the way I'm doing it, at least, is part of just basically the way that I'm doing it is for both of them. So hamstring and glutes combined.
And you say Chef City. Chef City. Chef City.
I really like not having, like the idea of not having my feet planted. I mean, they have to be on something, but I find it's much easier to kind of visualize like doing this without my feet constrained. Because it would be cool if you could, like we were talking about the other day, if you could move this way, but then also if you could make it so that this was like not necessarily frictionless, but because I feel like a lot of people end up getting restricted by this friction. Because you ever notice, like, maybe you don't because you're good at getting into it now, like you know where your feet need to be. But sometimes when I get in here and I go through the first rep, my feet will turn. So there's like some micro adjustment in my hips, and that leads to this changing. So I think it would be cool if this could, like, you know, pivot in some way, and this could just be higher up or adjustable at least. Oh, Angus, you're in the shop, man.
Show your own face.
I'll blur you out.
Most of it's gonna walk it.
I do love his seatbelt.
I'm glad you finally came.
It's so thick. Here. A wild modern meathead. Is this that? Okay. You can never tell with Ethan because he always has the same demeanor. So this seatbelt is from his website, Contraction Tools, I believe it's called. And this is a good visual to have that is opposite to the hyperextension machine, because the restraints are essentially on the same exact places, but we're restraining the knee now instead of the hip. So because we're restraining the knee, we want the anchor to be close to the knee. And so the pad can end up being in the same place. So you can think of these two as restraining us in the very similar ways, but we're trying to load the knee here. So we move this close to the knee, and we move this close to the hip, because we're trying to load the hip there. And then we have the seatbelt, which basically holds us back. So if this whole thing is an arc, much like everything is, this loads us in an arc. We need to have a resistance to this upward force which initially is this pad. And then as we move down through the motion and we start to curl our feet down and back under us, because we're curling essentially backwards, more horizontal, we need to have this to push into. And then we also push into the seatbelt. So it's kind of like a series of anchors in this pushes us down, this pushes us up, and then this pushes us back, and we push into the seatbelt forward. So it's just those vectors in, your output and just the way the exercise feels will be just totally different from what you ever experienced. So you want this full stack? And then you're going to
45 on it.
I bet you people have never seen a pro bodybuilder do a tibialis raise before.
No, they definitely have.
As he is pushing down, as he's plantar flexing, what he's doing is he's essentially releasing air. So as Ethan is pushing down, the weight is decreasing, and then as he's lowering or raising his foot, the weight is increasing. So the goal is essentially to match the resistance to his relative strength at every position. So I'll do, on seated calf, I'll do 2 sets, going all the way down, pausing at the bottom, and then 2 sets just to top half partial. Just because of how different strength differences are between the bottom and the top. So what I'll find is I'll usually increase the load by like 50%. So you're going to use your straps, and I'm going to use my loop straps like a real man. Like the real man that I am. I'm going to go like 380 and really just focus on that top portion. I think that's really important for calves in general, is focusing on pressing through the space right below the ball of the foot. Because if you start to press at or above the ball of the foot, you're going to start to claw the platform, especially if the platform is not one that arcs with your foot, which most late are not. So I really like to focus on motion of the heel, sort of up toward the back of the knee, almost like I have a string on the back of the heel and it's being pulled up. You don't want my loop strap floating around on there?
Oh, fuck that.
You didn't like it?
Yeah.
Dangling? It's like a little ribbon. So just for reference, what Ethan is doing is using a cuff, which is actually an ankle cuff from Amazon, so that he doesn't have to have his grip limit him in the raise. Also just good from an elbow, shoulder, forearm perspective, I have found, is to not be forcing your grip to basically hold you there. I'm using a loop strap, which is going over the top of my palm, but I'm also not really having to hold it in the same way, because your grip can be open with the loop strap. So these you can also find on Amazon for super cheap. I think I've mentioned them before, but I like to go with the loop strap because to me it serves the benefit of having something to extend the wrist against, but at the same time you don't have to actually grab anything. So your hand can be open and your muscles that are stabilizing your wrist and your forearm can be at a little bit stronger of a muscle level.
Like I overdosed on cocaine to take me away, like a bullet from
Okay.
I'm not shit, man. I got this shot.
I find that this hand is way more important than the hip. In terms of the restraint.
Yeah, I don't think I've tried that.
What?
I don't think I've tried that.
Yeah, just a little.
I don't really know where to put my hand.
It might change just the profile a little bit, but like that. And then just get like this part of your forearm and just jam it back there. So these are going to be standing calf raises, and this is a seat belt. I originally got this restraint idea from on purpose, and the idea is basically just for this to serve as an anchor for straight knee calf raise, which if you've never done it, feels totally distinct from any kind of straight knee calf raise thing, right? Because the force of your calf, and depending on where you're set up relative to the machine, may want to just bend your knee. So having something to knee extend into as you go through this can be really, really. So you want the restraint, right? This strap, which is from that website I mentioned, Contraction Tools. You want the strap to be roughly 90 degrees from your femur, and then just you got to really make sure that, much like in the other restraint things, that you're shoving into it the whole time, because it kind of defeats the purpose if you're not. But it's a little annoying to set up, get in and out of, but you can pretty much do it on any hack squat, calf raise. And if you're on a leg press, which Ethan likes, you can just kind of jam the back of your knee down into something. So this machine is also air pressure based. A lot of these that we have here are. And on the standing calf, because I'm on a surface basically that isn't arcing with my foot, meaning it's just a flat surface, I only really go up to about parallel with that surface. Because you go beyond parallel, you start to basically just claw the platform with your feet. Nice partials.
Like nothing has a bigger drop off rep wise set to set for me than Tibialis.
Tibialis, really?
Yeah. I had Paul today.
Maybe it's because you have so few options to like force disperse. You know what I mean?
I don't.
Sort of. I mean, like if you're doing a press, for example.
Oh, you're just saying like more shake to help me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even mean in the sense of fatigue or technique. I just mean like what does the joint action?
Yeah. Yeah. I got it.
I'm pretty happy with my tibialis development, you know. Leg press calf is for the lengthened position, and the body weight calf raise is for the shortened, which for Ethan is not too distinct, but distinctive. So I'm of the opinion that you only really need a mat like this to train your abs well. Now, something to hold your legs down would be pretty helpful. So maybe what I'll do is I'll actually use this bike now that I'm thinking about it. Sneak my toes under here. No, that's too low. Come over to this one. That's perfect. So just want to make sure this is in the frame. So abs, you know, bend the spine and control it into extension. So just going to do some regular curls maybe fucking put this one here. Put a kettlebell to use, you know, for once. And basically, I'm just trying to articulate around this pad. And I'm thinking about control of the lowermost ribs. If you can do 1,000 crunches, then you're probably not doing crunches particularly well. And it's really important to have something that articulates with the shape of your spine. Because if you don't, then you're not going to have anything to shove into backward. Like, if you just are laying down on the floor, just letting the reins drop off here. If you're just laying on the floor and you think about like the shape of the spine, lumbar spine is, you know, from my perspective, it's kind of curved in like this, lordotic. Then it goes to an S shape, like the other way. So it's like lumbar spine, thoracic spine, cervical spine. And so because your spine is curved in that sort of subtle way, depending on your morphology, maybe more or less, you want something that is curved that you can articulate around. Because if you don't have something that's curved to articulate around, you're basically just going to be jamming yourself into the floor the whole time, which in the case of a crunch is usually what happens. So people just end up flopping around like fish on these. So just going to do a couple sets to failure here. And if you want to manipulate resistance profile a little bit, you can raise the hands because your arms will function as like a longer lever, like a bigger player, if you will. So at the tail end of the range, you have more weight. Oh. So if you saw that last rep, how I kind of started with the hands there and then I moved them more quickly, that's a really easy way you can manipulate a resistance profile on something like a crunch, where if you make the arms longer and you raise them over your head, you're going to have a lot more weight proportionately or resistance in the bottom, right, when your spine is more extended. But then if you keep your arms that way and you reach forward with them, you're also going to have proportionately less resistance in the short position. So the longer the lever, the heavier the weight is in the length of position on this at the bottom, quote unquote. But the lighter it becomes toward the top, the less resistance that you have, the more leverage that you have to crunch, right? So if you keep the arms long, that's kind of a consequence of what happens, but you can also manipulate the position of your arms as you go through the range of motion. So theoretically, because you're going to be super strong here, you can really have your hands over here. But then as soon as you start to curl up, you can put your hands here almost to act as an assistance. So that's kind of what I'm going to play around with here. You can kind of move your hands, not in any sort of like momentum-y or overly momentum-y type way, but just in a way that can help you and assist you in terms of making a good profile. So 3 sets to failure, regular crunches. And then, maybe on a different day, I'll do just a variation that's like, I'll land it this way. And I'll do side crunches, but do that another day. Something that's important to keep in mind is with any sort of forward-facing crunch, you're going to have a lot of collective oblique TVA activity with the rectus stuff. So still get some side ab work with the regular crunches forward, but obviously proportionately more with anything that's more side bendy.